So again, let me welcome all the panelists and the moderator, Mr. Joe Tort. Joe.
All right. Well, thank everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Joe Tort. I'm the Associate Director for the Office of Professional Practice at Purdue. I've been engaged with the GEAR program here at Purdue University for the past 7 years. Our program here at Purdue is incorporating language training, study abroad, intercultural training to the curriculum of engineering. Joined today by 3 panelists who bring us great experience and knowledge about incorporating humanities into engineering. So we're joined today by Ben Brish, the Director of the DAD North America, Dave Garizimo, the Vice President of International Operations at American Axle and Manufacturing, and Ping Lok, the Executive Vice President for Corporate R&D at Roto and Schwartz in Munich. And the way that our panel is going to go today is we are going to have some introductions from our panelists, and then we have sort of a list of questions that we have come up with that we're going to discuss, and probably go through these topics for about a half hour or 40 minutes, and then we'll move on and have some questions from the general audience. So to begin with, I think I'm going to give it to Ben, who can give us a little bit of an introduction about what he's doing and his background.
Thank you so much, Joe, and good morning, everybody. I'm based here in New York, so at least here it's still morning, but I know parts of the audience are listening from different countries. I know from Germany, some of them. So it's wonderful to be here on the panel. I must admit at the beginning, I'm not an engineer, so I'm kind of probably part of the minority here. I have a background in the humanities and social sciences, history, language, and political science. It's great to be invited here as a representative of the German Academic Exchange Service. As you pointed out, I'm the director of the DED Regional Office North America in New York. And the DED is, of course, providing scholarships, funding, grants to all subjects. But of course, we have also specific funding for some subject groups, and I think we have something to offer for engineering and the STEM subjects, of course, and I would mention that too. I would also like to mention that we're providing scholarships, but also we're supporting conferences, and also we're supporting this conference. And I'm very glad that we can do that for many years, because we believe the International Annual Engineering Colloquium is a wonderful platform where people meet who exchange their experience and view on international engineering and cooperation. But let me come to what DED can offer for engineers. I would like to highlight one of our programs. Of course, many of you are probably aware of that we provide scholarships for studying in Germany or doing research in Germany. You can look that up at our database or on in the internet, on our websites. We have and these are open to all subjects, and a lot of engineers apply, and I think it helps them a lot in their career. We have a specific program that is exclusively for the STEM subjects, and I'd like to highlight this program. It's the so-called RISE program, so Research Internships in the Sciences and Engineering. The RISE program has 3 lines. The main line is RISE Germany. These are research internships in Germany for American undergraduate students who work in a German research group under the leadership of a supervisor in a German laboratory for a research internship. So if you don't know about this program yet, I think it would be interesting for you to look it up. RISE Germany DAD. You can Google that. You'll get all the information about it. And your students, undergraduate students, are offered through this program an early opportunity to get abroad and to have this study abroad experience and do an internship and be in contact with German research in the STEM subjects at a very early stage. The second part of the RISE program is the so-called RISE professional program, where the internships are at German companies. And this second option is open only to North American master and PhD students, so at a more senior stage. But I think that is also a wonderful opportunity. I know that two of my colleagues here on the panel are from industry, and I think you would also say that it's good to have this opportunity for master and PhD students to make an internship in a company and see how the company, how industry, how businesses approach what are their questions. I would leave it to that, because we said up to 5 minutes we should talk, and I think my 5 minutes are almost over. Later I can of course offer more about what we do and how we look at the questions that were raised. Maybe just finally one thing. I'm working, I'm director of the DED North America office. That's right. I have one more job. I'm also director of the so-called German Center for Research and Innovation, New York. And this is also, I think, interesting for engineering, because with this center, we bring together researchers and innovators from industry to discuss and find solutions for challenges on a global scale. And we have a lot of activities. If you look it up, German Center for Research and Innovation, New York, you will find what we do. And now my 5 minutes are over. Thank you.
Ben, I just had one question in regards to the RISE professional program. If you're a company in Germany and would like to offer an internship through that program, how do you go about contacting DAD for that, and what benefits might you have in offering that internship through the RISE program?
Good question, of course. Yes, it's quite easy. I can provide the contact person, the credentials of the contact persons in Bonn, but you would find them also on the webpage of the RISE professional program. Actually, it's organized quite well through a database, so the German companies can put in their can enter their offers, what internship they have in the database, so that their internship is listed in this online database, and the students who are interested, they will see it, they will find it there, and they apply directly to it. So it works very well. And what are the benefits? The benefits is that DED gives support to these students. So in other occasions, there are two benefits. One benefit is that we make sure that the best and well-qualified people apply for this program through us. So you have a pre-selection. You can be sure as a company that really pre-selected and highly qualified students apply. And of course, one more benefit is the funding. So it is expected that the companies also contribute to it. So it's not totally for free, but usually you would have to cover all of it. But our interns come with a scholarship by DED. So it's funding, and so it's less expensive for the company.
Thank you. We're going to go to our second speaker, and we're going to throw it over to Dave Garizimo.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Well, good morning, everybody, and good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here speaking with you today. As Joe said, my name is Dave Garizimo from American Axle and Manufacturing. I'm actually a Purdue grad, so I graduated from Purdue back in 1998 in the School of Mechanical Engineering, and from there started right with American Axle right out of university. So I've been here now for about 23 years. and really a career that's really kind of bounced back and forth between the engineering side of the business and the manufacturing side of the business, and had an opportunity to work on some projects, and then was thrown out into the manufacturing floor so that I could actually go manage those projects. Over the course of time, I eventually worked my way up to the point where I was in a position of a plant manager or plant leadership. And then was fortunate enough to really get an opportunity to start moving around the globe in different parts of the company in different regions. So I managed a manufacturing facility for AAM in Mexico. We had an opportunity from there to move to Poland, where I ran our plant, on to Brazil from that point for a couple of years, running our facility there. Came back to Detroit for a short period of time, in which I got my MBA at a university that won't be mentioned right now, but and then went on the road again. I spent a couple years in Germany as American Axle continued to grow and expand and do some mergers and acquisitions, and then finally came back here in my current role. So as I've grown throughout my career, obviously started with a technical background and put that to good use in some engineering functions, but then really started to expand my role and get more involved with people management, and certainly much more of the intercultural involvement as we moved around the globe and took over different leadership positions. In my leadership role today as Vice President of International Operations, that really encompasses a lot of things. And I think builds nicely on my experience with the company and my opportunity to see some different parts of the world. But I've got manufacturing facilities now in both North America and in the US and Mexico, South America and Brazil, Europe, both in Spain, Germany, and the Czech Republic, as well as Asia and China. So a nice global footprint for the operation I'm running. And really responsible for the day-to-day operations, what we think of in terms of safety, quality, delivery, and cost. But as you can imagine, much less of that now than I was when I was a plant manager, and really now more focused on the bigger business strategy and what our strategy looks like going forward, which from an automotive standpoint, as you can imagine, has been a very dynamic couple of years here with COVID, microchip shortages, the accelerating implementation of electrified vehicles. So a pretty exciting time and a pretty dynamic time, which is certainly challenging the industry, but also presenting a lot of interesting challenges as well. So again, pleasure to be here today. Thank you, Joe.
No problem, Dave. And I think we can mention the other university as we might have some attendees from Michigan State here today, and we're free and clear to mention Michigan State since we just beat them in football last week.
And I was certainly cheering on the right side. So,
okay, we'll go to our next speaker, Ping Lo.
Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Ping, and I'm also a Purdue alum from mechanical engineering like Dave. Class of 2006 for my bachelor's, class of 2008 for my master's. So I'm originally from Singapore, and while I was in Purdue, I was part of Purdue's GEAR program that Joe is leading right now, that was really designed for engineering students to gain significant international and intercultural experience. And when I took part in this program, I had the great opportunity of doing a year of my master's in Germany, as well as a spring break in Shanghai. After I graduated, I was actually sponsored by the Singapore government to study in the US. So I worked for the Singapore government, and I promoted investment and industry development for the technological hardware and equipment division of the sector in Singapore for close to 8 years. And half of the time I was actually based in Frankfurt as the center director in Germany. Since 2016 July, I worked for Rohde & Schwarz. It's a 2.5 billion euro German family-owned company specializing in test and measurement equipment like oscilloscopes, signal generators, or technology systems like TV transmitters and air traffic control radios. So I'm currently based in Munich at the headquarters. I'm one of the management board members of my company. And operationally, I lead the corporate R&D division, and I oversee 3 main areas of work. So first, we look at R&D of specialized technologies like microwave components and ASICs, as well as reusable technologies, common software, common hardware components that can be reused in a lot of our instruments. Second, we look at engineering services. That means software development, hardware development environments, You make sure that there are things like MATLAB and CAD available, or that there's a whole database of standard components that you can use for your bill of materials with the for developing new products and for manufacturing them thereafter. Then thirdly, we cover innovation. So new technology introduction and monitoring in areas like AI or quantum technologies, looking at university partnerships for technology, and also looking at startups, looking at new ideas within the company to use technologies. So of course, this sounds like I'm totally in the R&D world, but actually very similar to Dave. As I grew into this, as I grew in my career until I reached this job, the knowledge of business, geography, history, languages, these have been just as important in helping me understand how to navigate my daily environment to do well. I think if we just extrapolate it, many of my colleagues and I, we have to work in a global environment with customers, suppliers, partners, and international staff to determine the results that we have to deliver, and then we have to work together to achieve them. And just very simply, as people, we function better when we understand each other from a broader perspective beyond just the specific technical area that we need to know to work together. So I would say for this conference, for this panel, the message is a general knowledge of humanities would give us additional background knowledge to connect with the people that we work with, and therefore allows us to form many dimensions of trust with them. And personally, it will allow us to grow over time in our career as well. So that's all for now. I'm really happy to be part of the panel today, like the rest of the panelists here, and I'm excited to know what questions you may have for us. Thank you.
Thanks, Ping. So a question I want to start out with is thinking about experiences you have had. What are some of the experiences that you would point to that have helped you navigate some of the problems that you may have faced that are maybe interdisciplinary in nature or maybe cultural in nature? Might go back in reverse order and throw this one to Ping.
I would say that Dave has already partially answered this question, probably because he said that he had exposure to a variety of countries, variety of assignments professionally, and so on, right? And as you grow, I would say that to get the experience to develop the skills to navigate these interdisciplinary problems, you need I think first of all, exposure to life, right? A lot of things happen in life. Second thing is a lot of assignments professionally, and also when you are a student, if you had already been exposed to a variety of subjects beyond just engineering itself, that would have helped as well. So if I go back to my college days, I guess it helped that first of all, when I went to Purdue, I'm already an international student, so I have to fit into another culture. And when I went on the gear program, I had to work with more people from different cultures and different communication styles. And when I attended the spring break in Shanghai, and I watched how my American colleagues observed how the Chinese students were living and interacting, then I gained an additional perspective. And when I spent 1 year in Germany, and I did not know why, I decided to take my exams in German, and I learned that they were oral exams. Then it was a shock, but I was able to grow by navigating this new environment as well. So what has really happened through all these exposure assignments and so on is it has helped me to be quite to stay relatively open-minded about any kind of assignment I receive at the workplace. And since I was open to it, I got given really various assignments, and then I just did more interdisciplinary problems, more projects, and over time I also grew in my career. So that would be my answer.
And Dave, I wonder if there's any particular experiences that were really maybe eye-opening for you?
I think, I think even starting off in business, right, leaving university right away and starting to get exposed to some big projects and the activities that are taking place in the plants. I mean, you very quickly start to understand that it's a series of people and a series of different functions that are able to make these successful. I had a very big project as a young engineer. I thought I was a lot smarter than I actually was, but you very quickly start to realize that there's certain strengths and knowledge within the company that you really need to rely on in order to make those things successful. And even installing a new piece of equipment demands such cooperation and knowledge from not only the people in the plant and the people installing the equipment, but product engineers to develop that part, the purchasing people who are helping you acquire the materials and the machines to do it, the customer interaction and relationships you need to get those things approved. So I think very quickly you start to understand that it's that many people are involved in these things to make it successful. As Ping mentioned, you start to get more and more involved in these projects, and the scale becomes bigger, the reach becomes bigger as you start to get involved with more international teams. And I think back on all the times that we made a change moving from country to country. It seems like every single time that I got information or feedback from somebody who wasn't necessarily on the ground in that country about what their perception was about the people, about the problems, about what needed to happen. And I can honestly say 100% of the time, those people were 100% wrong. It was a much different story once you got there, once you started interacting with the team and the people, understanding what the underlying issues were behind what you could pick up on the phone or making a conference call now and then. So, really, I think being very involved, understanding the people, being there with boots on the ground to really see with your own two eyes and feel what's happening, really helps to, I think, clarify, what people need, what motivates them, how they can best move forward. And that has a lot of value to it. So.
And Ben, what are your thoughts in terms of developing interdisciplinary skills, the types of skills that we need to be successful in this sort of global environment?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more to what my colleagues just said on the panel. Maybe from the perspective of somebody who comes from the humanities and social sciences, I would want to also say that humanities and social sciences also need the skills and some skills and competences from engineers and from the STEM subjects. For example, when I was working at university, I was dealing with in history with multi-ethnic societies, so societies that have many ethnicities, as for example today many European countries or the US have. There was a lot of we dealt a lot with demographic data, with a lot of statistics, and in the humanities and the social sciences you cannot work without mathematics. You need a lot of knowledge how to interpret this data, how to work with it, so I also experienced how important it is in the humanities to have these competences and skills that we get from mathematics and from the sciences. This is one thought. And one other thought is, as a DAD, we also work a lot with companies because as a funding organization, and I think that's the same with other funding organizations, industry often looks at us as, well, they have the highly qualified people because we're giving scholarships merit-based to the best candidates. And so very often businesses like to meet with us or to meet with our alumni, yes, and say, oh, we're recruiting, maybe here are good candidates to hire for our industry, for our research, or for our development of our products. And when we talk to them, they very often say that they really need these skills that were mentioned by Ping and by Dave, this openness to other cultures, because as Dave pointed out, it's a difference to to hear the news about other countries, or to read something interesting. That's a first very good thing. But if you're on the ground, if you really have to go in the morning to get yourself something from the bakery and to communicate with the people or work in the laboratory with them, then you need to understand how they communicate, what's behind the sentence that they that you hear from them. So I believe interdisciplinarity here can contribute a lot to be an eye opener, to help us to be open and understand what other cultures, how they approach, also how they do problem solving. I'm absolutely convinced from our experience that problem solving, and I think engineering work is very much problem solving, right? But the background, the mentality plays an important role. How Germans, Americans, or Japanese people, or people in other countries, how they approach problem solving. So these are my thoughts here. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. Sigrid has posted a question. We'll go ahead and go off script and take her question. And if anybody else wants to post a question, please feel free to do so. So Sigrid asked Dave and Ping, how would you say your humanities and intercultural background with the humanities and your long-term immersion abroad have helped you in your career path? Did it provide you with faster acceleration, assuming more responsibilities due to maybe better ability to connect with others?
So maybe I'll take the first shot at this, and thank you for your question. I mean, for me, it certainly did. For me, it opened up a lot of doors in being able to be relatively successful in the positions that I took over abroad. I think each one of those steps was an additional learning opportunity for me. And being able to go into those different environments, facing different challenges, and being relatively successful in terms of the metrics, but also being able to build a pretty good team there, in which, after I left, we could turn a lot of those responsibilities over to local nationals and part of the team that was involved in those different countries. Really opened doors for me in order to take that next step. And if you look at my progression as we moved from country to country, each one of those plants became a little bit bigger and a little bit more complex, and in some cases had some different and bigger challenges. But certainly opened up bigger opportunities, and I think put me in a position where I was able to grow faster within the organization and get myself to a point at now a vice president level to oversee a global operation, where I certainly wouldn't have been able to do that if I hadn't gone through those individual experiences.
Mm-hmm. And Dave, just to follow up, you speak a little bit about what your exposure was to the humanities prior to graduating to Purdue, or how you gained interest in being able to connect with other cultures maybe after you graduated.
I had a little bit of exposure. I wouldn't say it was a lot. Probably the biggest advantage I have is we got our first opportunity to take the position in Mexico. Was my wife. She really studied a lot in terms of growing up Spanish. She majored in Spanish and international business in college. She was doing work in Mexico at the time. Her parents were from Poland. They had immigrated here in the early 70s. So she grew up speaking fluent Polish and with a different kind of cultural perspective than I did. And I was pushing very hard to get to this plant manager role. I really wanted to run a plant for the company. And they said, well, Dave, we've got your opportunity, and it happens to be in Mexico. And I was like, oh boy, I didn't see that curveball coming. But she was really great. She was excited about it. I understand the language. I understand the people there. I think it would be a great adventure for us and our family. And that really helped to, I think, catapult me to that point. And then once I was able to be immersed in that culture and really live in that foreign country for 3+ years, then I was able to have a little bit of that same perspective, and I was able to build off of that. So luckily I had a good catalyst there and good support from my wife and our family in order to start that, and then that got the ball rolling. As I think back into it, if I would have had a little bit more of that, a little bit more intensity in terms of the languages I studied, the the understanding or the studies I did in terms of intercultural different countries and those different types of opportunities, it would have made that leap for me personally much easier.
Thanks, Dave. Ping, your thoughts on this?
Well, I can talk about two dimensions. The first part, did it help me? And the second part about like what Dave mentioned, did my family help me, right? So the first part is knowing some humanities, being able to connect to people, being able to talk about history, geography, speaking different languages. None of my bosses ever explicitly told me that this would accelerate my career. Or rather, I was also never explicitly promoted because I had any of these skills. It was always about, were you able to perform in your job? And if you had a good performance, then you get to the next bigger assignment, you get good results, and you get given the next challenge and so on. But then as I got higher up in the organization and I had to start to place people for different assignments, then this naturally became a consideration that I also never told the guys that I place in special international assignments and so on, that this was one of the criteria. That's why I guess it's called a soft skill, right? Because these are some of the enabling factors that help you succeed, but very often it is not something that is that the bosses, or if you are a boss, that's not what you focus on. You focus on what needs to be done, what is right for the company, and you try to find the best person. But if you analyze it and you break it down, the answer is yes. In addition to the technical expertise, the ability to be open-minded, to have to be able to work in international teams, the willingness to want to assimilate in the new culture, the skills of being able to talk broadly about different topics will put you in a more favorable position to be considered for assignments with, say, talking to international suppliers, to run international plants, to take on international R&D assignments, and so on. So at the beginning, the immediate reflex answer is no, not explicitly, but listening to Dave's story, the answer is yes, it's actually quite an important factor especially when you are the one to have to decide who do you want to place in these assignments. Then looking back at myself, I'm also lucky to have a wife who is also very internationally oriented. So she's studied for 1 year in Japan. She speaks Korean fluently, and when I went to Germany, she went with me. She found a new job, learned German in a very short time, like 6 months, and found her own job after that. Got sent over to Tajikistan, and then I was like, okay, where is that? I had to accompany her. So actually, a lot of my international experience was also gained by taking some vacation days in the country that my wife was based, or when maybe she's on business travel. I also accompanied her sometimes, right? So she was then based. She went for business travel to China, and then I also followed her on the various flights that she took to see the various cities. It was a whirlwind, a bit of a tornado actually for me. Yeah, but I would say when you have a better half, yeah, in this case really a better half who is very, very adventurous, then you gain a benefit as well, and that's how you add that to your own repertoire of exposure, maybe as a kind of a growth in life after college. And then if you also apply it into your own job or your own work environment, you can gain opportunities to grow faster. So that would be my additional take on what Dave has already said.
Thanks, Ping. We'll go to another question, Dean's question from the audience. He says there seems to be movement to limit travel these days since people feel remote work, Zoom, et cetera, are making it less necessary and saving money. Will this stunt growth of employees? And I can say from our own perspective here, I mean, this is one of the concerns that we had when planning the conference this year, and one of the reasons we decided to do it remotely one more year, just because frankly we didn't know that people would have the travel budgets and availability to come here. So I know that's a concern. So I want to go to Ben and get his thoughts on this.
Yeah, that question is very understandable. And we as a funding organization, our main goal is to support international mobility. So this is this limitation of travel these days is really a challenge for an organization like us. How can we support international mobility if it's so limited? So I thank for this question. I think it's an important question. But we're in a situation of a pandemic where we learn every day what can happen, where risks are, and what could be done to avoid risks, or where parts where we have to accept that there are unavoidable risks in some place. We are now in a time where we have a lot of new tools that help us in the pandemic. These tools were delivered by science, so vaccination. We have guidelines how to behave and organize social interaction in a safer way. We can, again, it comes to data. I think it's very important today that the data that is out there can be is rightly interpreted, that people are not misled and are able to interpret the data in the right way. But I believe we are at a stage where we see some return to more mobility and traveling. So this conference is held now virtually, and I think we did that for a long time, and it's fine. I'm glad to be here. I thank the organizers. I think it's great that you do this. I also experienced in the recent 2 months, I participated at 2 conferences that were held in person or hybrid. So you could either go in person or participate virtually. And it seems to me that this is a model for the future. And I think we'll have to get used to these different options, and everybody, there has to be also some leeway for people to make their decisions. It can be for one person that they have good reason not to travel. But for others, the situation is totally different. It may be dependent on the individual health situation, on the question how people live in their households, what risks they are exposed to. So I think this is a big challenge for all of us in all parts of society, but in science in particular, how to manage all this. I don't have an answer to all of these questions. I just know that the questions are very important, and it takes a lot of knowledge and skills and help by science, in particular by engineers and data experts and of course virologists, epidemiologists to develop new schemes how to interact and to organize conferences and the work of scientists. This is what I would answer.
Thanks, Ben. And Dave, I wonder your thoughts on maybe American Axle and what you're doing in terms of travel for employees right now, and if there's less travel, does that impact the growth of people in the organization?
I think short term, it certainly does. And I'm very, very interested to see how this develops and plays out over the course of the next probably 12 to 18 months. I mean, I think, because of the pandemic, we've swung all the way in a direction. And now we're starting to walk back from that a little bit. We certainly aren't traveling as much as we used to. But I really believe that is going to start to change and open up. There's going to be a certain percentage, and it's hard to say what that percentage is right now, that there is some travel, there is some of that in-person interaction that we're going to forego because we're establishing a new norm, I think. But so important to us is being able to sit down at the table from somebody or walk through a manufacturing facility or walk through a supplier and actually see what's going on there. Getting a feel for how the people are interacting and what their body language is, just more than what you can pick up on a camera. So I think we're going to continue to transition back to the way it was. I don't think we'll get there. But I think as we make that transition back, I think we'll get back into a position where people are able to travel, they're able to get out and experience those things. And I think we'll resume some of those opportunities for people. But there's definitely a short-term impact in opportunities and growth and how people are, advancing their careers and knowledge and experience in the short term.
Ping?
Well, I would come from a point of view that's quite similar to Dave. Yeah, there are a lot of benefits when people sit and meet together, mainly in the exchange of ideas, mainly in the ability to understand the root causes of certain problems, or to actually look at the body language and understand if somebody is really interested to collaborate, or they are just giving you some lip service, and so on. So I agree with all of that. What has worked in business and also in our manufacturing facility so far is that the things that are so-called operational, a business tries to be very efficient. So there are a lot of standard processes and so on that's already there. This continue to run. This can generate revenues. Production can still go on, provided that you have a good policies inside the manufacturing facilities. So business still can run. In fact, my company still reported a 10% growth in business due to Corona, and partially because you save some money. But when we did the budget for the future, we knew that that was just we were just reaping the gains of efficiencies that we had due to how we were efficiently set up. And one day you will run out of this curve. If you do not start by bringing people together, talking to each other in whatever way that's possible, you will lose the exchange of ideas. And one example of a consequence is maybe the number of patents in your or invention reports in your company may reduce, because if people are not talking and they are thinking by themselves, they may not have a sufficient amount of discussion to say, hey, I got a great idea, I want to file this as a patent. And this actually reduces innovation inside a company. So I'm a fan of that. We must get back to a kind of situation where we have more face-to-face interactions, similar to like before. But I guess if we are not 100% like before, and we take advantage of the communication styles that we have learned during the pandemic, also in the future, we may end up being more efficient or even more effective than before. As an example for this conference, if it were going to be a live conference and I had to fly in from Munich to Chicago and then drive down to Indianapolis, I may have had to say, oh no, I really couldn't come because this happens to be an extremely busy period for my company. But I'm really grateful that thanks to Zoom, I'm able to be here. But then again, when you think back, I'm able to say this so readily. That's because I was from Purdue. I was from the GEAR program. I've had a lot of face-to-face interactions with Joe and a relationship that was anchored due to our face-to-face communication from many years ago. So I guess the right thing is to see it in a more balanced manner, where face-to-face interaction will always form the basis of relationships. And that actually is an enabler for us to have this kind of Zoom calls in a very highly trustful manner.
Ben, you have a comment, a question?
Yes, I believe this discussion is very important for all the fields of science, of course, and for industry, certainly. It seems to me now that I heard and what Dave and Ping said, it seems to me, and I think you pointed to that too, we went from one extreme to the other. So before the pandemic, for example, you would get an invitation to a conference in Germany or in the US, and you would have to travel, and it was like either you travel or you don't participate. There wasn't the option to participate virtually. So I agree to Ping that it's a big advantage now that we can be in contact, participate, have these debates. For example, the four of us here being located in different towns or even different countries or continents. That is a big advantage, and I think we will and should never lose that. So we made really a lot of progress using technology to connect internationally through technology, and we should continue to do so. On the other hand, as colleagues already pointed out, there are limits to it. For example, I am glad that now in this panel, I'm able to focus on the panel to listen what you're saying, but I know I'm sure you all found yourself in the situation that you were on a panel or in a virtual activity, and parallelly all the emails come in and messages from your team colleagues. And when you were traveling with a plane to a conference, you would always say, well, I'm away, guys. We'll be in touch next week. Until then, don't expect any answers. So you would be totally cut off contact, and you could focus on something. And it's so complicated now, and such a challenge for people to focus on things, including students. They're distracted too. When they attend virtual seminars, they get all this social media and emails they have to answer too. So it distracts them. This is one thing. And another thing, I mean, we could make a long list of disadvantages. For example, now that we have a wonderful conversation, I am not able to go to Ping and say, oh, I liked your idea, let's talk about it a little bit more. Yeah, that would be a usual thing that happens at a conference. So communication at in-person activities is such a complex thing that we cannot really develop it with the technology in the same way.
Very good. As we have about 15 minutes left, keep throwing it to the audience and see if anyone else has another question, or else I'll just keep asking my own. Sigrid asks, Ben, has DAAD Rise Professional ever considered opening a track for senior year applicants or graduating seniors? Yeah, could be great support for programs like we have here at Purdue, the GEAR program, the IEP program at Rhode Island, and others.
Good question, Sigrid, thank you. And yeah, I ask myself questions like this all the time too. It's a question of resources and of strategic decisions. I would definitely see advantages in your idea, and I would probably support this idea, but I would have to convince headquarters and a lot of other colleagues. So it's always a question of how do we focus our resources to get the best results. And colleagues would tell me as an answer that the profile of RISE as it is has a clear target group and is very efficient. But I agree, I personally tend to try to be more open and flexible with our funding schemes too. And what I can say is in our funding organization, the DAAD, but I believe it's the same with all the others, these discussions happen all the time. And from time to time, we adjust it. So thank you for the idea. I will take it from here and find an opportunity to discuss this. And let's see.
I don't see, Dean asked, I don't see many companies offering summer opportunities to university professors. Should there be more? I often think professors do not really understand industry. And maybe from Ping or Dave's perspective, you have any what connections might you have with university professors or opportunities?
So I can take a shot at this. Yeah. Well, from the perspective of my company, so we are actually quite most of R&D is actually in Germany. We have a small outfit in the US. We have some R&D in Singapore, then plus a few other R&D locations, but mostly it's concentrated in Germany. Then naturally, what you will see is that a company like Rohde & Schwarz does have a lot of university technological collaborations with German research institutes like Fraunhofer, or with universities like a Technical University of Munich, where there we even have professors who come in regularly to teach, and every year he contributes 1 or 2 thesis students, for which if they complete their thesis, they eventually, these students also eventually join our company and so on in very specific areas like digital signal processing or something like that, right? FPGAs and so on. Now, is it meaningful to extend it also to American companies? Then this is something that my company has never thought so much about before. But you would find that there are, because my company is not really the biggest, right? It's just what they call one of the hidden champions. Yeah, very specialized, very niche. But if you ask me, there is inherent value, because when I went on the gear program, I actually went to the gear program under the with my professor back at the time from ME, Professor Paul Soika. And there you see that a professor has a very, very wide range of knowledge that can actually contribute to industry problems that deal more with fundamental technology and has nothing to do with the actual product development. So in areas such as quantum sensing, for instance, for my company, right, then that's a very, very specific area of engineering. We do have, we did do our scouting, and we found that in the University of Basel, there was the correct professor with even the right experimental setup that could help us advance our specific needs. Then we formed that collaboration, and it was actually a professor and industry collaboration. There are examples of this, just that most of my colleagues and most of the senior management in my company, they come from a German background, and they may not necessarily understand the American system. Mm-hmm. And therefore, it will point back to the theme of this conference, that if you have a good background in intercultural competence, if you have a good background in the humanities, and you understand how different parts of the world work, you could actually create new kinds of collaboration and bring you new results.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Ping. We'll move on to the next question. I'll ask this to Dave. One of the questions here is about international cross-cultural training that maybe companies do for employees. And I wonder, is there, from your experience with American Axle, or maybe what you've seen at other companies, do you believe that companies are providing good intercultural training to say those employees they send overseas? Is there something that you would recommend universities to do to better prepare, future engineers for those type of opportunities?
I think, from somebody who's been through, several of those in terms of our transitions, I think it's pretty good. It gives good insight into the environment you're about to enter. I think we really focus on that as part of our transition plans. I think for the people that maybe aren't necessarily making those moves or doing those international assignments, I think the opportunities are a little bit less limited. And certainly some companies do better than others, but I think there's certainly opportunity for that going forward to improve in that area. I think if you take a step back and you really look at it from a university standpoint, I think there's a lot of opportunity there. And I really think the integration into the technical fields with more of the humanities is an important part of that. Communication, language, understanding those cultural backgrounds, the cultural toolboxes that we've spoken about in the past, and how well you're able to understand and deal with those different cultures. A lot of that general information and awareness goes a long way, so that when you get into a situation and you're working with somebody from Mexico or Germany or China, maybe you don't have a lot of experience there, but you at least have an understanding of this is what's important to my colleague in China. This is what he values in our conversation, and this is what really bothers him if we start to take this approach. Just having that general understanding so that you can have some of the basics and communicate appropriately, I think can have a very positive impact. So I think there's opportunity at all levels, both out in business and industry and from a university standpoint.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. And maybe the final question, which was one of the questions that we had originally thought of asking. So how do engineering firms make difficult decisions when there are humanistic or environmental outcomes that may conflict with business outcomes? and interesting to see maybe your experience with this in your companies and any sort of typical things that you may do when you run into these types of conflicts.
Maybe everybody's very quiet, so maybe I'll take a crack at that. I mean, I think that I think we at AAM we focus a lot on what we call our cultural and strategic values. It's something that we break out and really reinforce in all our plants in terms of what kind of company we want to be, what kind of social responsibility we want to have to the world around us and our communities and the people that interact with our company and our plants, what we expect from our people in terms of responsibility and teamwork and respect for one another. So I think that the constant reinforcement of those values has a major impact. And when I look over the course of time, in terms of our international growth, because when I started at AAM back in '98, I think we were just on the very, very verge of starting to expand globally, maybe not even there yet. So over the course of the last 23 years, I mean, we've really gone from zero to being a true global company. You know, over that course of that time, we've really been able to start integrating a lot of people from different regions and different continents and different countries more into our central organization or headquarters here in Detroit. And I think that that has a very positive impact as well. You know, now you've got people in leadership positions from India, from Mexico, from Europe, and now those different ideas, those different communication skills, that different compassionate understanding for what people in the different countries are going through is really important, because you can't run it all from a central location. You can't run it all from Detroit or New York or Texas or Munich. You know, it's got to be something where people have a good appreciation of how other people work, and there's a good, I think, cultural toolbox or cultural awareness on how to deal with that. So I think, you know, over the course of time, I've really been able to see how our company's grown in that aspect, and I think that's an important recipe going forward.
I can add on to Dave's answer. Well, two parts to what I can contribute, right? How do engineers make the decision, and how does the engineering firm make the decision? Engineers will make the most practical recommendation possible in general, right? And engineers, they like to optimize and solve problems. They will analyze various possibilities, and usually they find a kind of a win-win situation that minimally keeps the lights going on for business as we search for a long-term solution. And when you have engineers who think more humanistic, and when environment outcomes are more important or naturally instilled to be more important, such as culturally in Germany, everybody is quite environmentally conscious, right? Because that's part of the educational background. Then you will tend to get quite a balanced outcome that management also accepts, because maybe it is not maximizing the profit based on these recommendations, but it tends to be more sustainable. Now, so there's the contributions of the engineer. When it comes to the engineering firm, then I agree 100% with Dave that the company's culture and values will help to ensure the best outcome when you are challenged to make a very difficult decision. A lot of these happen at culture really starts at the top, right? Where top management regularly talks about existential questions for the company, and there will be difficult dilemmas to look at and so on. So, and at the next highest level of management, then these are also translated into the cultural norms of the company and what we define as corporate social responsibility, like what Dave said. So in the case of my company, we say that we want to help to make the world safer and more connected. We want to make the world safer and more connected. Then our fundamental values to do that is that we are entrepreneurial, reliable, and impactful. And then based on that, every part of the business defines very well for itself what each of these values mean for them. And this is something that then becomes quite specific after a while. So being entrepreneurial means that we have to work as an end-to-end business. That means that we from every department have to speak at eye level to everybody. It's not that R&D rules over sales, or that sales rules over production, or that production throws something over the fence to R&D and so on, right? So it breaks down to that, and it is actually a very, very complex mechanism of setting the culture and then getting it implemented throughout the whole company for the whole global operations. Therefore, when it comes to engineering firms, I think one of the enabling factors to make a balanced decision when it comes to difficult decisions for human and environmental considerations versus business, then it actually boils down to the culture. And then you see that the CEO together with the top management team set the moral compass for this.
Thanks, Ping. All right. Well, I think that takes us right on time to the end of this session. George will be happy that we're staying on track. I want to thank Ben and Dave and Ping for the perspectives and joining us today for this conversation, and to everybody else who joined us and engaged in the conversation. Thanks, everybody, and we'll send it back to George.